Welcome to the Especially for Athletes podcast, where we explore essential principles that empower athletes to learn life's most valuable lessons through sports.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Especially for Athletes podcast. What's up, Dustin? How are you today?
Hey, Shad. Good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you. So, a couple weeks ago, you sent me this clip from Charles Barkley. There's this show, In Depth, with Graham Bessinger, and he sat down and had this hour conversation with Graham Bessinger, and he talked about an incident in his life. It was a really cool clip, but tell me first, just what made you want to send that clip to me, and what stuck out to you about that clip?
Yeah. Well, Charles Barkley is one of my favorite personalities. I really liked him as a player back in the 80s and 90s. He's been so fun to listen to on TV the last 20 years. That's really where he's made his mark. I think most young people probably don't realize how good of a basketball player he was.
He's just so real. He's like the most authentic character.
Yeah.
He's awesome.
There's things he says that I don't agree with, but I love the fact that he just speaks his mind, and he understands that it's okay if you don't agree with me, but I'm not gonna, I'm gonna say what I feel, and so I've just always enjoyed listening to him. And this interview, I'm not sure how I found it. I was just on a long drive, and I'll look for different interviews, and it's actually from several years ago. But as I was listening to it, this particular piece grabbed me, and I immediately thought of a couple of our principles. There's several of them in this little story that he shares, and shot it off to you. So I think it'd be good to listen to it and then talk about it for a minute.
Yeah, let's do it. So here's Charles Barkley with Graham Bessinger talking about an incident that happened, what he learned from it. Really, really cool. Here we go.
Well, because when I first got to the NBA, I was angry. I was angry at Miss Gomez. Miss Gomez is my high school Spanish teacher.
Whose class you flunked and you didn't graduate?
I flunked that. And I didn't get to graduate. I had to go to summer school.
Yeah.
So I hated Miss Gomez. I was mad at my dad, because my dad, he lived in California. He came to see me graduate. And they didn't tell me right before I wasn't going to graduate. So he just kind of reamed me pretty good. And I tell to myself, this is the last time I'm ever going to let anybody control my life. I'm going to stick it to Miss Gomez. I'm going to stick it to my dad. I'm going to stick to my high school. I'm going to stick it to everybody and shove it up their face. So my first X amount of years, man, like when I was in college, I was just going to kick everybody's ass. I was just going to maul anybody got in my way. And then I get drafted to the NBA. So then I still got the same attitude. And then I forget when the spit incident happened. It was probably my third or fourth year at the NBA. And I remember I got suspended, obviously, and should have. And I remember sitting in a hotel room. And I was like, dude, what the hell is wrong with you? What are you so angry about? The next couple of days, I sit down and I said, okay, it wasn't Miss Gomez's fault you flunked Spanish. Okay, let that go. And then my dad, I says, hey, it didn't work between your mom and dad. He did fly from LA to Alabama to see you graduate, and you, big dummy, didn't graduate. Okay, that's on you too. Like, okay, you don't have to be mad at your high school. You flunked Spanish. And then from that day forward, every time I played basketball, I said, just let people see your talent. You don't have to be mad at anybody else. And so that was the turnaround for me. Because, and I've used this analogy, whether you Ron Artest, Mike Tyson, Dennis Rodman, guys I respect as people. But I think they played like I did, on the edge. But I think if you play sports on the edge, it's not a matter of if you go off the cliff. It's just a matter of when.
All right, Shad. So thanks for cutting that up and allowing us to listen to that. It's a great interview. He goes on to talk about other things in this interview. He talks about his time on the Dream Team and some other things in his career. He had a pretty crazy career, but that particular story of playing on the edge, and that story of him being angry and blaming some people for some circumstances that for his reaction to things, and he blamed people for it, and it took him a minute to realize, hey, my favorite part, I think, is when he said, talking about Mrs. Gomez, when he says, she didn't flunk you, you flunked you, right? Like, you're the one who, you're the reason you didn't graduate.
Yeah.
But it took him several years to get to that point. And, I think his advice there was to tell people that, look, don't make that same mistake that I made, because you can end up doing some things. He did something that, fortunately for him, he did it when there wasn't social media, or it would have blown up even 100 times more than it did. But I remember this spitting incident that he's talking about. Yeah. Imagine if that had happened now, and there'd been all the different angles, and everybody would have shared it, and it would have been all over everything. But he spit on somebody that on the sidelines, and he was angry, and he lashed out, and for a lot of years he had a very negative reputation. No way, or nobody would want to invite Charles Barkley to speak to their kids or to be on a TV show and represent, TNT like he has at that particular time, because of some of the ways that he was acting and things that he was doing. And he,
in fact, didn't he become famous for saying, "I'm not a role model"?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be a role model. Like, don't consider me a role model. Stop telling me I'm a bad role model. You be a father to your kid. I'm not a role model. I'm a basketball player. It's like he was kind of famous for that.
Yeah, and that was a famous commercial that actually probably has some truth in it. I know a lot of people, that was a very controversial issue, and I remember hearing it, and I kind of, I guess to a point I agreed with what he was saying, right? It's not his job to raise our kids. It's our job as parents to raise our kids. And if pro athletes do stuff they shouldn't do, okay, but that shouldn't, if we blame the athlete for our son doing something because the athlete did it, then we're that's passing the buck. That's not the athlete's fault, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, that playing on the edge thing is something, and that competing with contempt, which is, a principle that we talk about a lot. And then the maturity to come into the realization of it, and being mature enough to identify and apologize, really, and change the way he approached stuff, I think is the real meat and potatoes of that interview.
Yeah. I love what he said about playing on the edge. He even referenced some people that we're all familiar with. You have the Mike Tyson with the Vander Holyfield biting his ear, a piece of his ear off. You have Dennis Rodman, who all of the things that he did, and you had Ron Artest, that Malice in the Palace that ran up, and the only instance I know of where players were throwing punches at fans.
Yep.
And his warning was, like, he was playing with so much anger, and he said, if you play on the edge, it's not if you go off the edge and do something stupid, it's when.
Yeah.
So my question for you, Dustin, like, you've coached in so many settings, and you have all these high school football players right now that you're coaching. I'm sure there's heated moments in the game, and there's a ton of different personalities, right? Like, there are some Ron Artest personalities, Charles Barkley personalities on every high school football team, I'm sure. What do you think it looks like when he says, if you play on the edge, it's not if, but when you fall and make a mistake that's going to impact your future, that people are going to know you for?
Yeah.
What do you think he's describing when he says, if you play on the edge? Describe playing on the edge for me.
Well, I think the way he was describing it, and the way that maybe coaches would describe it, because I've used that phrase before, being on the edge, and I would think that most coaches, when they talk about playing on the edge, under the umbrella, I think of what Charles Barkley was talking about, although, like I said, he was talking a little bit more about the anger, the being motivated by hate and by anger and by revenge part of it. When I say playing by the edge, or other coaches I hear say playing on the edge, I think they're talking about you do have to have a level of aggression and a level of just passion and energy that is sometimes borderline too much.
Yeah.
Or borderline
like you have
crazy.
to have an edge to you. You have to have a chip on your shoulder. Like, those are phrases that are used often.
Yeah, and I think that everybody, when you're in the middle of whatever the sport is, if the game's getting a little physical or it's intense and it's having a little bit of fight in you, even a little bit of attitudes, to not back down and let somebody, walk over you when you're playing at somebody else's place and it's loud and you're being, heckled or talked down to. And you have to have a little bit of an edge to you. You can't just show up and just roll over, right? So in that sense, I think coaches want their players to have a level of passion and energy about them that doesn't embarrass themselves or embarrass the team. But, the opposite of that is a kid out playing that just is out there, that just doesn't really care. And that's very frustrating for a coach. So you kind of like those guys that play with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder and maybe are on the edge. I think what Charles Barkley's referring to, though, is when it's just pure, real, deep, embedded, historical hate. It goes back deep in your life. It's years ago, and it's embedded in there, and it's this, like he said, he was just going to maul everybody in sight. He was just going to kick everybody's ass, is what he said. It was just this, I don't care about anybody, and I'm going to show everybody that I've been done wrong, right? That I'm the victim, and so everything I do is to show everybody that they were wrong about me. And when the reason that he got a bad grade had nothing to do with not liking his basketball attitude, it had to do with he didn't go to class, right? And in 2025, in the current landscape that we live in, I think we have to be a little more honest with kids sometimes, and parents have to be a little bit more honest with. It's not always the umpire's fault or the coach's fault or the teacher's fault or it's usually because somebody didn't go to class enough or study enough, or somebody didn't go to the weight room enough or practice enough. Those are the reasons. And it took him several years to realize it's not my dad and mom's situation didn't work out. I wish I'd had my dad in my life more. I wish I'd been able to graduate and had that experience. But to be bitter your whole life, and then to let a sport that you love be played in such a way that expresses that bitterness, he was never going to really enjoy basketball. The thing about Charles Barkley now, in fact, a professional golfer just 2 weeks ago, John Rahm, actually talked about this in his interview. He played really bad in the last 9 holes or so of a major golf tournament. And he quoted Charles Barkley, because Charles Barkley says this all the time. He says, "We are so blessed to do what we do, play basketball for a living. Now I talk about basketball for a living. I'm so blessed. I have nothing to complain about. I get paid money to talk about and to watch basketball." And this golfer, John Rahm, was referring to that too. He said, "Look, I get paid to golf. If I have I played bad the last 9 holes, but I still, this is what I do for a living." Right? So it took Charles a minute to realize that. When he did, his career was, I think he played happier. But yeah, playing with an edge is, I guess, when you're the edge, when it's motivated by hate and anger, it's just a matter of time, like he was referring to, that you're probably going to snap and do something that's going to embarrass you, your family, your friends, your school, your team, might get you in big trouble. And so you have to understand that if that's your personality, if you have a temper issue, right? If you're easily angered by something on the team or by situations that happen in games, you're I don't even use the word competitive. That's, I think, a sellout. You're just ultra intense. Then you have to understand that edge for you, that's a far cliff that you're going to walk off eventually. And realizing that that's your personality, you got to kind of make sure you might get 5 feet from the edge, but you can't get to the literal edge, because you'll fall over and ruin your life possibly.
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot. I was listening even this morning as I was driving around doing some things. I was listening to a podcast on the Big 12 conference, and there's this stuff that's going on at BYU. Quarterback and has been accused of sexual assault, and then last year you had up at the University of Utah, they were picked to win everything and just crumbled, had a bad season.
Yep.
And they were doing this interview, and the guy was like, "Yeah, in my eyes, the guest, BYU's done. Like, BYU's done. Like, all their hopes for next season, it's done." And now the fact that no one's talking about the University of Utah anymore, these are just 2 colleges you and I are familiar with.
Yeah.
I think there's a healthy, if I was a BYU player and I heard people saying, oh, they're done, I think there's a healthy edge where it's like, really? Watch this.
Yeah.
Or University of Utah, they talk about now like they're this irrelevant school, even though last year they lost like 6 one-score games, right?
Yeah.
And I could see them right now in workouts being like, just watch, just wait. That's a healthy edge. The anger, I'm going to hurt somebody, I'm going to like play with rage, that's the stuff where you're playing on the edge instead of with an edge. And I think that those are two very different things. It's okay to play with an edge. It's not okay to play on the edge, right? And I think like my dad used to always tell me growing up, the easiest time to make a decision and not do something stupid is before you're in the situation, Like if you're going to a party, the easiest time to decide, I'm not going to drink no matter what, I'm not going to ever touch alcohol. Well, that decision's way easier made before you walk in the door than when people are trying to persuade you to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that might be a healthy way. If someone knows they have a little bit of an edge to them and that they're on the spectrum from careless to intense, they're pretty intense, it'd be good to say, okay, here's some lines I'm not going to cross. Like between the whistles, it's gonna be like I'm bringing havoc from whistle to whistle. I'm bringing havoc, but I'm never gonna purposely try to hurt somebody. I'm never going to, cheap shot. I'm never like. There are some things you could decide before that you're not gonna do that I think would be super helpful if you're someone with an edge. I'm just thinking of that player out there that's like, I'm kind of that guy. I'm on the Ron Artest, Charles Barkley, like just within the parameters of the game, destroy people. But I'm never going to cross these lines.
Yeah.
And I think that might be a helpful discussion for a parent or a coach who's listening to this going, oh my gosh, I'm coaching a Charles Barkley, or my kid is a Charles Barkley, a Ron Artest type person. We need to have this discussion about lines that won't be crossed.
Yeah.
So any final thoughts on this, Dustin?
It's really easy when you play that way. And as you were saying that, I was thinking about, there were people that I wanted to kind of prove wrong, and there still is. I mean, I had stuff just in coaching this last year. There were some things that motivated me to coach differently or to coach better, and sometimes those are other people. So I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing, as long as like you said, if you're playing with an edge, not on the edge, that you know where your line is, and that you're very sensitive to the fact that if I get to this line, bad things can happen. And I think that, if you're somebody who loses your temper quickly at your son's basketball games while you're watching them.
Yeah, even parents, that's a great point, Dustin. Like, there are Charles Barkley parents, not just players. In fact, probably more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that. Like, just look in the mirror and say, look, if you've ever said anything other than, oh, come on, or something in a basketball, if you directed a comment directly at a referee or an umpire, other than kind of under your breath to the person sitting next to you that was a foul or something, if you've directed something at an umpire or a ref in hopes that they would hear it, then you have a little bit of an issue, and something could happen so much that you might say something really mean or really wrong and really get yourself in trouble. And so you have to know that. And like you said, you have to kind of make that decision beforehand that I'm just going to have to sit and butt my and because I have a tendency to fly off the handle a little bit. And if you play that way, especially nowadays where so many more cameras and things are being recorded and taking pictures of things, you don't want to do something that's going to ruin you and be what defines you when somebody Googles your name, because you justify your actions by, well, I'm proving people wrong, and in doing so you act like a fool.
Yeah.
Your motivation is hate and revenge and not to be successful and because you love the sport. And it becomes very selfish too. Yeah. It's not to win so much with your team, it's to prove people wrong. You're playing backwards. You're trying to prove people from yesterday instead of forward and the people I'm with now, and what do I have coming, and enjoying the fact that you are able to to play a sport that you love. So we just have to be careful. All of us have a level of that, whether we're playing or not, and it's probably a good inventory check to say, okay, how am I doing? Where am I at? What's my line? Am I somebody who could fall off the edge?
Yeah.
What are those triggers that light me up, that get me fired and get me going, and be smart enough to recognize those and stop it when it happens? Because if not, you get in the moment and things get out of control, and then people lose their minds.
Yeah. I love the phrase, be 100% responsible. Like, you can't just say, I'm a hothead.
Yeah, I'm really competitive. I'm just so competitive.
I'm just so competitive that I can't control myself. Like, I love how you said that. Him sitting here in a hotel room and going, what the heck are you doing? And having that realization, like, we need to have that realization. To the parent who's screaming at, 15-year-old referees on a soccer field or coaches or whatever. Yeah. Like, you need to sit in a hotel room and go, dude, what the heck are you doing? What are you doing, right?
Yep.
And same with the players, same with coaches. Like, this excuse, I am a hothead and I am ultra competitive. Well, that's fine. There's a lot of ultra competitive people that are not idiots, that don't do stupid things, that don't fall off the cliff. And so you got to know that, take that inventory like you talked about. So.
Yep. I agree. So,
awesome.
Good one. The whole interview is good. If you're looking for, a good interview to listen to, that's a good one. But I thought that was a good message, and hopefully can help a parent or coach or one of the athletes we work with.
We'll put the whole link to the whole interview because it really is inspirational in nature. It's just awesome. Goes along a lot with the principles that we're talking about. And so we'll put the link in our show notes. Grateful for that interview by Graham Bessinger. And Dustin, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Shad.
For your thoughts there. Eyes up. Do the work.
Thank you for joining the Especially for Athletes podcast. To learn more about Especially for Athletes organization, get a copy of our book, The Sportlight, or to bring our program to your team, school, business, or organization, visit us at especiallyforathletes.org.